So I'm super excited about the next talk on data breaches and organization cybersecurity culture. The speaker is Dr. Daphne Yao. She's a professor of computer science at Virginia Tech. Her research interests include building cyber defenses, as well as machine learning for digital health, with a shared focus on accuracy and deployment. She creates new models, algorithms, techniques, and deployment quality tools for securing large-scale software and systems. Her tool, CryptoGuard, helps large software companies and Apache projects harden their cryptographic code. Her patents on anomaly detection are extremely influential in the industry, having been cited by over 200 other patents from major cybersecurity firms and technology companies. Without further delay, Dr. Daphne, welcome to our conference. Please, the floor is yours. And okay, perfect.
And I've been doing this for many times, and so I can do it, in my sleep. So this is people really need to understand that cybersecurity landscaping is keep evolving. Back in the 80s, it's called friendly, hacking. It was like kids, teenagers, and then so Barbara Fraser, she said famously that it was like a beach a day at the beach. But then, of course, it's no longer like that. And as a matter of fact, when you go to beach, that's where hackers started working. And so the Department of Homeland Security warned people that during Labor Day that you have to really take care of your systems, and this is a part of the lesson learned from REvil attack. REvil or REvil attack. It's a supply chain attack during the Labor Day in 2021, and I stopped tracking my data breach incidents because it's just happening so much, and a lot of them that it wasn't that publicized because just for various reasons. There's also good news that people who back up, who protect their data, and in some small government, they don't have a lot of budget, but they do the right thing, and so they are somewhat resilient to ransomware attacks. And interestingly, that half of the people who paid their ransom would not be able to get the data back, and so don't think that cyber criminals are legitimate businessmen. And recently, there's some good development. The U.S. Cyber Command, together with the foreign government, took down REvil by hacking into their servers. So one of the REvil leaders called one day said that, "Good luck, everyone. I'm taking off." And so obviously it's a constant arms race. The hackers are working, and we need defenders to work as well. It's constantly happening, and this kind of dynamics was proved back in the 1980s by Fred Cohen, and he showed that security is really relative. That if the hacker knows your detection mechanism, they will be able to bypass it, and so they will be able to find the attack that you won't be able to defend, and then that prompts you to write a better defense, and then certainly they will be able to bypass that, and so it's a constant arm race, and that's you see that outplay in the reality all the time, because the antivirus scan gets bypassed, and because the hackers can just tweak it a little bit and achieve the same goal without triggering alerts. So it's a constant arm race. It's hard to say that you have one tool that is going to be just solve all the worst problem. And so I'm going to go through some of the details in the target data breach. It was at that time the biggest, up to 100 million consumer data. There's some overlap between the 40 million and 70 million data, different type of data. It's multiple steps, but then the key thing is that the point of sale terminals got hacked. It installed a called Black POS malware that would collect the credit card information. Normally, they would just process credit card, but in this time, it's collect the credit card information and dumped it into internal target network and then exfiltrated to an external site. And turns out, that attack was during the American holiday season, November, December, lasted for almost a month. Before that, in the spring, that malware was on sale in the black market. And this is a Russian speaking black market, and only for $2,000. So it's not that expensive. And then the hacker who launched the data breach doesn't really need to be technically savvy. They just need to run some code. And people find out his started entry point was a phishing attack on an air conditioning company, which is baffling. And then the air conditioning company, after the data breach, then the following year, they made an announcement saying that our air conditioners cannot access remote servers. Okay, our refrigerators cannot send network traffic, and so then people wonder what's going on here. And one of the theory that has been floating in the media is that the invoices, the payment processing portal, is a software called Ariba. It's done by a French company SAP. It's a e-commerce software. May have some vulnerability that maybe there's executing malicious PDF, scripts that when Fazio upload invoices, Target need to pay for the air conditioners. Things gets executed, code gets executed that shouldn't be. But clearly that that also shows the network segmentation issue. The target shouldn't really allow the invoicing or whatever information submitted by a third-party vendor impact the point of sales devices where you slide your credit card. The lack of transparency really make it difficult, because that is a missed opportunity, and then we never learn what really happened and how to prevent it. You always learn from past failures, but in a lot of these cases, that is not the case. So as mentioned, the FireEye did generate multiple in 2 sets of alerts, but then the alerts for some reason was sent to the headquarters. I don't know what kind of context security analysts forward the alerts, but the headquarters decided to ignore them, and they probably thought it's a false alarms. And if those alerts were treated more seriously, then the breach, you have like 2 weeks, about 2 weeks lead time to stop the breach, right? And so as Marshall and I was discussing, that false alarms are really counterproductive. In early 2018, the island of Hawaii experienced a missile alert, which turns out to be a false alarm. Well, it's really unfortunate, but then it's really a long, panicky 38 minutes. And the false alarms in cybersecurity setting, it's causing embarrassment, and then the embarrassment set aside is just not very productive. People, security analysts, on average, and this is, I would say, good case, 2.5 hours to process to confirm it's a true positives. But a lot of times it's really hard, to you understand what's really happened, why the machine generates alerts. If it's, say, it contain malware signature, that's relatively easy, but it's more behavior, a kind of analysis, that's hard. And so one of the research opportunity is to find a better warning system. And on a larger scale is just to understand how tools are used in deployment. A lot of the papers published in top security conferences only focus on the technical aspect, but then it's only halfway there. The tools will be used by people, by security analysts, by users. The other half really needs a lot of work, and so security analysts are not typical users, but then their tasks are a lot harder, right? So and also a lot more critical. So they may be more proficient in terms of cybersecurity knowledge, but then they also are given tasks that's very, very difficult. Sorting out whether a message is malicious, a behavior, a transaction is malicious. And so one of the study that led me to look into the payment card industry, which talks about the data standards that system has to follow. And so Target was in compliance to the data security standard DSS. But then it still got hacked. And so it's very important to understand this data security standards is like a baseline. So that in someone said, once you are in compliance, it's you have the driver's license, but then how you drive is still, could be very different. And this is a alliance, and this is the international alliance, not just the US, formed by big banks. And because they suffered from so many data breaches, financial fraud, and they're like anyone processing credit cards really have to follow those kind of sets of criteria, cybersecurity criteria, and that include vendors, acquire banks, issuer banks, and so here is a questionnaire that you have to the banks and then the entities has to answer. But in addition to questionnaires, there's very detailed regulations. And one of the good thing about Target is that the multi-factor authentication became a requirement after the Target data breach. And so this is a constantly evolving standards. And when I was looking at this, I noticed that regardless of how big the vendor is, if you look at annual transactions, 6 million and more, that's, like Walmart, Target, big retail companies, they have to do on-site auditing. But big or small, they all have to go through this approved scanning vendors. And so this is the external vendor, external scanning vendor company scan, sort of like penetration test. And you have to do it four times every year. But I look at some of the websites, it's hard to say what they do. The companies who perform this kind of penetration test, it has to be very good. But in reality, we did the experiment, we set a test bed, we find that most of the scanners are not very good in the sense that sometimes they know that the website has vulnerabilities, but they still certify them as being PCI DSS compliant. And as a result, most of the websites we look at are not fully compliant. And so you have a really good set of policies, but the enforcement is really falling behind. And in reality, this is not very surprising. A lot of the issues are very difficult from a research point of view as well. It's making sure the website does not have cross-site scripting. It's considered a relatively, in order to achieve 100% accuracy, it's relatively hard. And so the PCI Council also, they understand this, and they really, and I think this is the research community, our researchers really need to also focus on this type of practical deployment related questions. Don't think that, cross-site scripting, cross-site request forgery is done, solved. No, not really, far from it. Target made several improvements, including two-factor authentication, joined the intelligence sharing center, and centers. And on the right-hand side is US DHS data center sharing utility related power companies, cyber intelligence. So after the Target data breach, and people, I think I start to monitor those kind of large scale, and I start to think, okay, from the organization perspective, and Equifax happened in 2017. Right after the incident was reported, the Equifax, the official language is, it was just this one system admin who forgot to patch. It took that person 146 days to patch a vulnerability that was announced in May, and the exploit refers to a readily runnable code to hack a system, taking advantage of that vulnerability. was released the day after the vulnerability was announced. And so you see that on March 6th, there was a patch available, but then, and so I wonder, is it really just one person that caused half of America's citizens and from the American population to lose their really critical information? Equifax is a credit agency, that credit score that keeps your social security number. When you open a mortgage, when you buy a house, buy cars, the first thing the lenders, that the banks will check your credit score. Are you a trustworthy person who will be able to pay off the loan? And so the vulnerability is really relatively common. It's sort of similar to buffer overflow. You execute untrusted command input. So don't execute untrusted input. But then later on, people find out that there's also cross-site scripting vulnerability. Okay, major websites, if you fill out the form should sanitize. Okay, don't just take whatever the external input and display it. That's the recipe for all these, basically the majority of the cybersecurity issues. And then people also find that the PIN used to freeze your credit account in order to defend data loss is based on a PIN, which can be guessed. It's supposed to be random. And so that was also very disheartening. Later on, people find that the admin was used, the default username and password was used as Argentina data server. And so it's just a multiple vulnerability, multiple holes. And so you wonder, did Equifax executives pay any attention to the data, the massive amount of critical data that they control? And you may say that, well, in their defense, security is relative. And I just said, there's no way that you achieve perfect security. But then not making effort at all is very different from best effort a practice. Okay, and so in cybersecurity, you really have to make an effort. You make your best effort, and this is your effort also is proportioning to the sensitivity of your data, the amount of information that you have, and how important the data is, and of course. So it really goes back and it leads to the organization culture and then the social conscious and all the aspect that it's really out of the hand of the consumer. And as a company, they have to be socially responsible. And from a technical point of view, there's so many solutions, right? The intrusion detection system, network screening, network segmentation, two-factor authentication, anomaly detection, data leak detection. I've done a lot of data leak detection. And so the companies are not just controlling their data, they're impacting people's life in the hospitals, utility companies, power companies. And so one of the data, one of the solution that I've been working on is called accidental data leak, and this is where it's in addition to the malicious data leak, where you may have employees who forward the documents to the wrong individual without encryption, and the information transferred to unsafe places without encryption, or unencrypted information sitting on your file systems. And so we have a mechanism that we call the fuzzy fingerprints that allow cloud providers to do this type of inspection without learning the sensitive information. So you can have say Amazon Cloud to be able to do this screening, but then they still don't know what is your sensitive information. They do this fuzzy matching. And we also extended the work where you say the data is transformed a little bit, so that you still be able to catch some of the leak, the patterns. But really for this particular talk, because that we are in the session in data science plus ethics, and I think this is a wonderful topic. I want to just discuss a little bit more about the executives, and they are really, in private companies, they are really controlling the culture. And this is the congressional hearing that Mark Zuckerberg had to went through after the Cambridge Analytica scandal, and now he's in a hot seat again because of the whistleblower regarding Facebook promoting divisive content. But several years ago, because of the Cambridge data Analytica data leak, during the congressional hearing, one of the lawmakers said something which really make me it's very unsettling. And he said that, Mark, that you can go back to California and hire, you have two choices. You can hire the most expensive lobbyist who descend on Capitol Hill, and then convince us to make the loosest possible regulations on your company in terms of data privacy protection, or you can do the right thing and then really put an effort in protecting consumer data, work very hard to do that. And so it's really your choice. and so I was really shocked because, there are lawmakers, there are congressmen and senators in the US, but then they're asking like a private citizen, an individual, to decide what to do in terms of this massive amount of consumer data. But in US, it is indeed very much so. The private sector has so much power, and then they have a strong influence because they have money and they have strong influence on the laws. And so it end up becoming come down to a few individuals' decision. And so I would say, if you're in a position to make decisions, really make sure you invest in cybersecurity. And of course, sometimes you get backlashes, like in Facebook, stock price went down, you get fined. I think a lot of the US company get fined by European Union because of the privacy violation, and so there are backlashes, but don't wait for that. Really be the social conscious and social responsible company, because you're sitting on a lot of consumer data, and if you're in a position to influence decision makers, please do so as well. And this is really something that everyone need to be very much aware of. And so in my effort to democratize data breach knowledge, data breach prevention and what happened, and so my students and we made short YouTube videos to explain what's going on, and because of to just demystify all these issues, and hopefully people will realize that it's preventable. It's to some degree preventable. You cannot achieve 100% security, but then you will not have epic failure like what Equifax went through. And certainly I encourage other researchers to do this as well. And so this is all what I want to say. I didn't time myself. I hope we have some time for some questions.
So from my side, so given the experience from the companies, what do you recommend to, what is your biggest advice to researchers, to cybersecurity researchers?
That's an excellent question. I think our field has progressed in a way that is technically is very mature, I would say, from a research point of view. If you look at the research papers, the major approaches has been very well visited. However, I see a huge gap, complete blue sea, in the deployment aspect. The solutions published in papers, can they be used in practice? That I think needs a lot of community support, meaning that people, our reviewers need to recognize efforts that address those issues. my CryptoGuard paper, what you mentioned in the introduction, got rejected so many times. It was just it's so disappointing. People are like, we improved the false positive, we improved the accuracy, it to so much that it's very, very impressive. But this kind of achievement was not very well recognized by the community. People like to see buzzword, like to see attacks, more buzzword. And so
Story of our lives.
yeah, right. Things that are flashy, but then you see in practice a lot of practitioners, they are struggling, and they're like, they really need solutions, and the researchers are not helping them and not helping them, and it's a culture that is very hard to change in the academic setting. But there has been some progress. Some of the conference that I've been to, ACSEC and IEEE Security Development Conference, has really recognized, and we just have to do it. Otherwise, people will be, research will be just inventing wheels again and again. It's not very meaningful.
Okay, thank you for your answer. So I have a question from Ting from the cybersecurity group at QCRI. It seems companies tend to collect more and more information from individuals, and individuals tend to be quite loose, allowing companies to collect data. Does it mean we have to live with such a situation for a long time?
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Ting. I think I feel like because of the Facebook, this morning I also saw a news. I think 3/4 of American adults being polled saying Facebook is making our society worse. So of course, it's just a one data point, but I have some faith. I feel like if you look at the media reports, it does expose a lot of the issues that those big companies, data collection companies, are having. And then the Federal Trade Commission, FTC, and the FCC, and so are working hard. And when I went to conferences, I met folks from there, and they do work towards that. It sometimes takes a long time. So I do have faith. I think it's moving towards a balance. May not be as good as we wanted and consumer want them to be, but then it's a constant. It's sort of like arms race. So they have to push. You have to have advocates, so from consumer, from privacy researchers, and then to represent the general public. But then you just have it's. I hope to reach some sort of a balance that people will feel reasonably happy. And I think from the Facebook perspective, I feel like this is going in the right direction. Even though Facebook, in the earlier years, they say do wonder to our society, connecting people from all around the world and so on.
Well, I hope this is the case. You have an optimistic view. When we hear the leaks every time, we're scared more and more.
Yeah, I know.
So Sanjay from our QCI, the AI team, is also asking, there are many outlier or anomaly detection techniques, and several hundred papers are written every year. Do you find the use of deep learning for anomaly detection useful?
Yeah. Oh, this is a great question. We recently did a survey on deep learning for CPS detection, anomaly detection, like with all the buzzword. And we surveyed and we tested some of the tools. And we find that it could be useful, but it's very hard to say because a lot of the papers that they didn't do, I think they rush into making the conclusion, oh, our tool is useful, we can achieve 100% or whatever. But really what matters is in what scenario deep learning is useful, and what are the limitations. And I feel like people are not brave enough to recognize that, and then that really needs to do additional measurement. And so our we did some preliminary comparison. We didn't find any tools that are really good enough to be deployable, to reach kind of not even close. And so first of all, there's not many data sets. I know Singapore, the SUTD has a great data set, but then not many. Lots of people claim that they are doing this, but then it's a very limited setting, and so more comparison, more measurement, it really is necessary. I do support exploring deep learning, but then after a while, it's all become academic, like a mental exercise. If it's not reaching the deployment level or that close to it, and we are researchers, we don't have a lot of real world data and so on, so it's understandable to some degree, but then at least make an effort in towards that direction. Otherwise, if it's a pure intellectual exercise, it's too easy. And so you can of course find a scenario where you can detect 100%, but then is this relevant in practice? Excellent question.
Okay, so thank you. So I can go on and on with the questions because this is my area, and I enjoyed this discussion. I am enjoying it so much. Thank you again so much, Daphne, for your time and for the insightful answers and the talk.
Well, thank you so much. I really enjoyed the discussion. Thank you so much, Michelle.
So our